Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I hadn't been back in this town in years, not since I left for the academy. But when Uncle Jim passed, I knew it was time. The funeral was set up like some strange cross between a memorial and a high school reunion. The same faces, same gossip, same fake smiles. It was like nothing had changed. I was the last to arrive, stepping through the old oak doors of the church in my wildlife enforcement uniform. Badge, sidearm, everything. It was supposed to be a respectful look, but I knew it stuck out like a sore thumb here. The murmurs started the moment I walked in. Dad, of course, was holding court at the back with a group of old buddies. As always, loud as hell and proud of it. "Big civic center deal coming through," he was saying. "Going to change the whole landscape around here. Gonna make Calloway construction untouchable." I barely even looked at him. Dad's voice was one of those things you just tuned out after a while. Then, like he was waiting for it, he tossed me a smirk. "Katie's still chasing raccoons for the government," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. I didn't even flinch. Let him have it. Lisa showed up just then, her heels clicking on the hardwood as she glided across the room in a black designer dress that screamed more, "I'm above this," than morning. Her smirk followed her, like a second skin. She had a way of making everything sound like an insult, even when it wasn't. "Katie," she said, "maybe you should settle down. Leave those woods and tents behind. There's more to life than whatever it is you're doing." I didn't say a word. I knew better than to waste breath. Silence always carried more weight with them. They had no clue about me. No idea that I'd spent the last decade working undercover for a federal environmental crimes task force, busting people like them. They thought I was still out in the wild, chasing animals and making minimal impact. And I let them think it. The dinner was held at Dad's estate, just like it always was. Same big mahogany table, same leather-bound chairs that squeaked when you shifted. The walls were still lined with fake family photos, dusted just enough to look respectable. Expensive trophies, big fish, hunting birds, a couple of deer antlers hung around the room like the walls were trying to show off how successful the Calloways had been. It was all for show. Nothing real about it. Dad sat at the head of the table, carving a roast like he was the king of some dynasty. Every slice of the knife had an air of authority to it. He didn't even look up as he kept talking about the big new land development project, how they'd cleared wetland exemptions and got zoning overrides for a new shopping complex. The words were slick, like he had them rehearsed. Proud, almost smug, as if he hadn't just danced through every regulation meant to protect the land. "You know," he said, tossing his knife in the air like it was a trophy, "with this new deal, the Calloway name will be stamped across the whole county. We're talking millions in revenue." He took a pause, his eyes flicking around the room. "And I'm sure you all know how to handle a little red tape. Gotta know the right people?" He leaned back, clearly pleased with himself. Brent, Lisa's husband, nodded along like it was gospel. Brent was a city councilman, a guy who'd been playing politics long before he married Lisa. He was good at pretending to listen, good at pretending to care, but it was clear he was just trying to secure his own piece of the pie. His tie was too tight and his smile was too eager, like he was angling for approval. I let my fork clink against my plate, staring at the meat I couldn't bring myself to eat. I knew this was their game, their routine. I'd been watching this dance my whole life, and I wasn't going to jump in now. Dad kept rambling about his plans, his voice thick with self-satisfaction. "We've got the city wrapped up. Brent's been helping push through the permits. And you know Katie," he smirked. "Well, she's still out there chasing raccoons for the government." I didn't respond. I just swirled my water in my glass, pretending it was enough. Silence was a weapon. They thought it was weakness, but I'd learned a long time ago that sometimes, the quieter you are, the more they reveal. Lisa leaned in, her black dress making her look like a mannequin at some high-end boutique, not like someone mourning their uncle. She tilted her head and spoke like she was offering me a treat. "Katie," she said, her voice sweet with a bite to it, "you really should settle down. Get out of those woods. Find a real job. All this wandering, I just don't get it." Her words stung, but I didn't react. I knew exactly what she meant. It was the same thing she'd said when I left for the academy, her way of reminding me that I wasn't like them, that I didn't fit in. But she didn't know. None of them did. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't, was that I had spent the last 3 years building a case against everything they stood for. That development Dad was bragging about. It was at the center of a federal investigation, a 3-year, multi agency investigation. I had the permits, the satellite images, the witness statements. I had it all. Every illegal dump site, every bribed official, everything tied back to Calloway construction. They didn't know that. They didn't know I was the one who launched the investigation, and I wasn't going to tell them. Let them keep talking. Let them dig their own hole. Brent cleared his throat and leaned in, his eyes twinkling like he knew something I didn't. You know, Katie, he said, it wouldn't hurt to think about the bigger picture. Maybe it's time to focus on something that actually builds, not just breaks down. It was a jab, but it was obvious he was trying to get a rise out of me. I stared back at him, my face as unreadable as I could make it. Let him think I was too stupid to see what he was doing. Let him wait for me to screw up. But I didn't. I just sipped my water and kept my mouth shut. Let them talk. Let them dig their own grave. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Dad's still going on, carving pieces of beef like he's some kind of king, his voice booming across the table. We just got that environmental injunction dismissed last week, he says, wiping his hands on a napkin. Those federal agencies are a joke. They can't do anything without the right judges on their side. He chuckles, like it's some kind of victory, and I can feel the heat building behind my eyes. It's all I can do not to stand up and rip the whole table apart. He's so damn proud of himself for dodging regulations, for putting his own pockets above everything else. Lisa shoots me a sideways glance, her fingers wrapped around her wine glass, then leans in just a little too close. Katie, she says, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. Wouldn't it be nice to do some real work for a change? You know, something that actually matters. I bite my cheek hard enough to taste blood, clenching my jaw to keep from snapping. That stung. But it wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. It's her way of reminding me I'm not a part of the picture they've painted. The perfect little Calloway family, clean, polished, full of accomplishments, none of them earned by the work that actually matters. I think about the ranger we lost last year, Tim. He was one of us, part of the force, and he died because of illegal dumping. Chemicals in the water, toxic enough to kill him in days. His body was found floating in a creek after his team responded to a tip about the site. It was a reminder of what happens when you cut corners, when you let people like Dad and Brent keep pushing the envelope just to line their pockets. I swallow hard and force my focus back on the table. It's not their fault they don't know. They wouldn't understand anyway. My cousin Scott, a local reporter, leans forward, glancing at me from across the table. So, Katie, he asks, that smile of his barely holding back a hint of curiosity. What do you think of the development? The Calloway project? You think it's going to be a good thing for the town? I take a breath. It's like he's throwing me a bone, like he thinks I'll soften up. I don't. Some projects destroy more than just land, I say, flat, steady. I'm not giving him what he wants. They can't get a rise out of me now. Dad laughs, that deep, fake laugh of his, and leans back in his chair. She's still got that tree hugger badge on her sleeve, he says, the words like poison, meant to undermine everything I stand for. I feel my face go cold, the sharp edge of anger cutting through me. The same words, the same insults, over and over again. He's always been like this. Nothing I do will ever be good enough for him. I stand up before I can say anything else. My hands are trembling, but I force them to stay still. I've got a 6 a.m. arrest briefing tomorrow, I say, my voice cool and controlled. So I'm going to head out. No one stops me, not a single word. They just keep on eating, pretending this is a normal night, like I'm not about to destroy everything they've built. As I walk toward the door, I hear Lisa's voice again, calling after me like she's some concerned sister. Don't be so dramatic, Katie. But it's too late. I'm already out the door, heading to my truck, already thinking about the arrest I have to make in the morning. I wasn't going to be part of their little performance anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. I drove the 4 hours back to the Regional Task Force HQ in silence. The night was still heavy with the weight of everything I'd left behind. The anger in my chest simmered as I replayed their smug faces at the dinner table. Dad, so sure of himself. Lisa, acting like she still had control over everything. Brent, pretending to be a man of the people. They had no idea what was coming. I didn't let it show. I couldn't. I kept my eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel, and my mind focused. No distractions. It was like the world outside didn't matter anymore. I knew what I had to do. They weren't going to get away with it. The sun came up just as I stepped into the operations room. The room smelled like stale coffee and printer ink, but it didn't bother me. The walls were lined with monitors, flickering with images of the locations we were about to hit. Agents had already been briefed, everyone moving like clockwork, like we'd done this 1,000 times. But this wasn't just any case for me. I watched as the FBI agents moved in on the Calloway Group's offices. I could almost picture them in there, Dad pacing, smug as ever, like he had all the time in the world to work out a deal. I didn't care how many lawyers he called. He was going down today. The EPA enforcement teams hit the dumping sites next. I watched the satellite feed flicker, showing the teams in hazmat suits moving into the places I knew were contaminated, the ones Dad had kept hidden for years. I wondered if he even knew how much damage he'd caused, how many people he'd hurt to build his empire. I kept my eyes glued to the screen, watching as Brent was arrested at City Hall. He had no clue what was happening until the door busted open. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, but I wasn't feeling sorry for him. He'd played the part of the politician too well. He'd known what was going on and turned a blind eye. He deserved what was coming. Then came the moment I was waiting for. My father's face flashed on the screen as agents stormed into his house. He was in the middle of dialing his lawyer, his hands shaking. For the first time, I could see it. Fear. Real fear. It was almost satisfying, but not enough. He'd destroyed too much for me to care about that now. I didn't speak a word. My team kept moving through the operations room, all business, all focus. They had no idea what this meant for me. They thought it was just another case, another bust, another win for the agency. But they didn't know I was about to tear apart the foundation of everything I'd once called home. I sipped my black coffee, the bitterness sharp against my tongue. I needed the focus. The calm before the storm. They didn't know what it cost me to get here, how hard I'd fought to keep my hands clean, how many times I'd had to bite my tongue just to stay in this fight. It was all moving so fast, but in my head, everything was still. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Years of careful planning, of watching from the sidelines, of staying quiet while they took everything from the land and from the people who couldn't fight back. I'd stood there while they laughed and mocked, but this was my turn. I felt the familiar weight of my badge tucked under my shirt, close to my chest. It still felt right. This was my truth now. The Calloways wouldn't get away with it. Not this time. Not ever again. The courthouse was packed. Reporters stood in tight clusters, their cameras trained on the entrance, like vultures waiting for a carcass. Local officials were scattered around, their faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort, like they were all just waiting for the bomb to drop. And drop it would. I walked in wearing my federal uniform, my boots clicking against the marble floor. I could feel the eyes on me, could practically hear the whispers. It wasn't every day the daughter of the town's most respected magnate showed up at the prosecution table. They were all waiting for me to break, waiting for some sign of weakness, but I didn't give it to them. My badge flashed under the courtroom lights as I moved toward the table. I took my seat, placing the stack of paperwork in front of me. The indictment was thick, enough pages to tell the whole story, enough pages to destroy everything they'd spent decades building. I didn't look up as the judge called the session to order. I didn't need to. I could feel their presence before I even turned my head. Lisa was there, sitting in the front row, pale as a ghost. Her face was frozen, her eyes wide, staring at me like she couldn't quite believe I was the one doing this to them. She didn't say a word, didn't move an inch, but I could feel the weight of her gaze, like she was trying to bore holes into me. Brent sat beside her, refusing to even glance my way. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched, but he knew better than to try anything. He wouldn't be able to hide behind his political ties this time, not with me on the other side of the table. And then there was Dad. He was sitting at the defendant's table, looking every bit like the powerful man he used to be, confident, arrogant, like he could still talk his way out of anything. But when his eyes met mine, something shifted. For the first time in my life, I saw him freeze. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me like I was a ghost. It was as if he couldn't believe I was here, doing this, bringing everything down on him. I didn't look away. I didn't feel sorry for him. The charges were read aloud, and I watched his expression twist. Conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act, bribery, wire fraud. Each word hit like a punch, and I knew he could feel it. He knew what was coming. I had all the evidence. The satellite images, the witness statements, the receipts showing where the bribes had gone, all of it laid out in front of him. His empire was crumbling in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I didn't need to say a word. I just opened the indictment, flipping through it page by page. I read it like it was nothing personal, like it was just a job. But inside, I was seething. All these years, all this time he'd gotten away with it, hurting people for his own gain. He thought he was untouchable, but I was here to make sure he knew he wasn't. Lisa shifted in her seat, her breath shaky as she glanced at Dad. I saw her hand tremble, just barely, before she clutched the edge of her seat like it was the only thing holding her up. Brent still wouldn't look at me. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, his face tight with the kind of anger you only see when someone knows they've lost. And then there was Dad, still staring at me, eyes locked on mine. I could almost hear the questions in his head. Why? How could you? I wasn't going to answer him. Not here, not now. He didn't deserve that. The rest of the courtroom fell away as I focused on the document in front of me. Every word was like a nail in the coffin. The evidence was undeniable. His network, his whole operation, laid bare for everyone to see. I wasn't just taking down a construction mogul, I was taking down the whole system he'd built. And in the silence that followed, I finally felt it. The weight of what I was doing. It wasn't just a case anymore. It wasn't just a job. This was my truth. This was me standing up for the land, for the people who had no voice. This was me finally saying no to everything I'd been raised to believe. I didn't look at Dad again. I didn't need to. The truth was already on the table. The fallout was immediate and ugly. The media went wild. Local news ran my name across every headline, like I was the villain in a story they didn't want to believe. Daughter of town's most prominent builder brings down entire network. They loved that angle. They wanted the drama, the scandal, the interviews with outraged locals, the shock of CALLOWAY, the good girl gone bad. They were hungry for the narrative, and I knew they'd twist every piece of it to fit their story. Lisa called me twice that first day. I didn't pick up either time. I could guess what she'd say. How could you? Why would you do this to our family? But I wasn't in the mood to listen to her. Not now. Not when everything they built was crumbling and I was the one holding the match. Brent resigned within a week. That was no surprise. When the pressure hit, he folded fast. He'd been holding onto his city council seat like it was a lifeline. But once the arrests started stacking up, he realized he didn't have a choice. The mayor stepped down 2 days later. I almost laughed when I saw the news. The whole town was hemorrhaging, but they deserved it. They were all tangled in it. Too many fingers in too many dirty pies. Then my supervisor called me into his office. His tone was level, almost too calm. "You just cleaned out half a town," he said, leaning back in his chair, arms folded. "You ready for what comes next?" I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. I'd been ready for this day for years. "Been ready for 3 years," I replied, keeping my voice steady. It felt like the truth had been buried inside me all that time, and now it was finally out. He nodded, studying me like he was trying to figure out if I was holding something back. "Well, you know what happens now. There's more to clean up. Bigger fish to fry, and not everyone's going to roll over like they did." I met his eyes. I didn't need him to remind me. I'd known what would follow. The corruption didn't just stop with Dad. It ran deeper, further into places I hadn't even touched yet. I had the paperwork, the evidence, and I was just getting started. There were more arrests to make, more people to drag into the light, and I was ready to see it through no matter what it cost. As I walked out of his office, the weight of everything hit me again. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt tired. This wasn't some heroic story. It was just the truth. And the truth was always ugly. It didn't make things better. It didn't fix the past, but it was all I had now, and I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. It was a Tuesday when Lisa showed up at the federal office. I didn't expect her. Hell, I wasn't expecting anyone. But there she was, standing in the lobby, her eyes red and puffy, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't even bother to wait for an appointment. She marched straight up to the front desk, demanding to see me. I heard her voice before I saw her. It was a mix of desperation and anger, that sharp edge of someone who's been backed into a corner. She didn't care who was listening. "I need to talk to Katie. Now." They didn't know what to do with her. She was just a mess of emotion, all jagged edges and broken pieces, so they called me down to the lobby. I could see the way her body was trembling as I approached, but she didn't say anything until I was right in front of her. "You're really doing this, Katie?" Her voice cracked as she spoke, and I could see the tears threatening to spill over. You're tearing our family apart. All of this, just for what? To bring Dad down. To destroy everything he worked for. I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I didn't tear the family apart, Lisa. Our father did that a long time ago. I'm just the one who had to face it. Her face twisted, and she stepped closer, voice rising. You did this. You're the one who's been plotting, gathering evidence behind our backs. Do you really think Dad deserves this? After everything he did for you. I felt the anger in my chest tighten, but I stayed calm. This wasn't about me, and it sure as hell wasn't about her or Dad. I followed the evidence, Lisa. Our father is guilty, and so is your husband. You know that as well as I do. Her face went pale, her breath sharp as she stared at me like I had just stabbed her. She slammed her hand down on the desk, making the coffee mug jump. You've always hated us, she shouted, voice trembling with a mix of pain and rage. You've always been waiting for the chance to ruin us. To make us pay for something we didn't even do. The words hit harder than I expected. I'd never been a part of the Calloway family in the way she thought I was. I'd spent years watching them tear through people's lives for their own gain, pretending they were above it all. But hearing her say it like that, hearing her accuse me of hating them, it made the whole thing feel even worse. I took a breath, letting it steady me. I didn't back down. I didn't want to hate you. I wanted to be proud of us, but I couldn't lie to protect you. Not when I knew the truth. Not when people are still dying because of what Dad did. Her eyes searched mine, but there was nothing left in them. She was too far gone, too wrapped up in her own version of what family meant to see the truth. She looked at me like I wasn't her sister anymore, like I was just some stranger standing in front of her. Without another word, she turned, her heels clicking across the floor, the sound sharp, like the final note in a song that had played out too long. She didn't look back. Not once. I stood there watching her leave, the door swinging shut behind her. The silence in the office felt heavier than before, like the weight of what I'd just done was finally settling in. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel any kind of victory, but I knew I was doing the right thing. Even if she couldn't see it, even if none of them could. 6 months later, the courtroom was quieter than I expected. There was no drama today. No last-minute pleas or last-ditch efforts to delay the inevitable. Just a low murmur of voices, the shuffle of papers, and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. The reality of what was happening had set in for everyone. There was no escaping it now. Dad sat at the defendant's table, his face hollow, like he hadn't slept in weeks. The old confidence was gone. He'd spent months fighting this. But today, there was nothing left. No more tricks, no more lawyers' games. He pled guilty to all charges, conspiracy, bribery, wire fraud, and accepted a 12-year sentence without a fight. It was the only way out, the only option left for him. Lisa sat 2 rows back, her eyes vacant, her hands folded in her lap like she didn't even know how to hold them anymore. She'd barely spoken to anyone in weeks, not even me. I'd tried reaching out once, but she'd pushed me away, like we were already strangers, like I'd never been her sister. Brent's name wasn't on the docket today. He'd been disbarred, his life crumbling in its own way. He was waiting for his trial, the charges hanging over him like a cloud that wouldn't break. I knew what was coming for him, but I wasn't here for him. I was here for this. For Dad. When it was my turn, I stood up and walked to the front, my uniform crisp and my badge clipped tight to my chest. It felt like a lifetime ago that I'd stood in the same courtroom, watching everything fall apart from the other side of the law. Now, I was the one giving the words that sealed it. I didn't speak long. There was no need for a speech, no theatrics. I wasn't here to settle scores or make a statement. I recommend sentencing based on the impact of these crimes, not any legacy he may have built, I said, my voice steady, measured. This wasn't just about land or money. People's lives were destroyed because of the choices he made. That's what matters here. It was the truth. The long trail of destruction he left behind wasn't just a set of documents or financial records. It was the people who were hurt by his actions, the ranger who died from chemicals dumped illegally, the families whose land had been poisoned, the ones who couldn't speak up. I turned to sit down, my heart a little heavier, but I didn't look back at him. Not yet. The judge gave his decision, and as Dad was cuffed, I saw it. The slight turn of his head, the almost imperceptible motion. It was like he was trying to find me in the crowd, Or maybe he just didn't want to leave without seeing me one last time. But when his eyes finally found mine, I held my ground. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He looked away almost immediately, as if I wasn't even there. His face twisted into something like disgust. But I didn't take it personally. This wasn't about me, not anymore. As the guards led him out of the courtroom, the silence felt final. This was the end of a story I'd spent my whole life running from. But now it was over. No more lies, no more pretending everything was fine. Lisa didn't move as he was taken away. She didn't speak, didn't even shift in her seat. She just sat there, looking at the empty space in front of her, like she was already gone. I stayed where I was for a moment, listening to the sound of the gavel, the soft shuffle of people filing out, the last echoes of a world I didn't belong to anymore. And when I finally stood up, I felt that weight lift, just a little bit. There was more work ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd done what I was meant to do. And I didn't look back either. The days after the sentencing blurred together. The case was closed, but the fallout was just beginning. It didn't take long for my supervisor to call me in and tell me what I already knew was coming. "You're moving up," he said. "Regional enforcement lead. We need someone who knows how to clean up the mess and isn't afraid to get their hands dirty." It wasn't what I'd expected, but it felt right. The promotion came with a new set of responsibilities, a bigger team, and more pressure than I'd ever had before. But it also meant I could do more. I was tasked with taking on the corruption tied to environmental crimes across the region, something that had been ignored for years. It was exactly what I'd wanted when I first signed up, even if I hadn't known it at the time. A few weeks later, my face ended up on the cover of the state agency's bulletin, next to a headline about how I'd helped bring down a corrupt empire. The photo was taken during a briefing, a shot of me in my uniform, holding a file like I was ready to take on the world. I didn't like the attention. I never had. But this time, it didn't feel so bad. It felt like maybe it was finally for something that mattered. Then, out of nowhere, I got a letter from Lisa. It was a small, thin envelope, her handwriting on the front. I'd almost forgotten what her handwriting looked like. The letter was short, like she wasn't sure what to say, but it still packed a punch. She asked me, flat out, "Do you regret it?" I didn't have to think about my response. I wrote back once, just a single line. "Not for a second." That was it. I wasn't going to apologize. I wasn't going to explain myself. I'd made my choice, and I wasn't going to second guess it. I lived in a modest apartment now, close to the forest I'd grown up loving. The apartment was small, nothing fancy, but it felt like home. Every morning I put on my badge, clip it to my uniform, and walk out the door knowing it still meant something. Some people inherit power. They get handed the keys to the kingdom, and they keep everything for themselves. They spend their lives building a legacy out of lies. But me, I earned it. I worked for it. By doing the things no one else wanted to. By facing the truth, no matter how ugly it was. And that was enough for me. I stopped chasing their approval the day I chose truth over comfort. I've never looked back.